Hey, it's Eric G. Around the House is sponsored by Baldwin Hardware. For 75 years, Baldwin Hardware has been known for its first-class quality and craftsmanship in door and cabinetry hardware. As an alumnus of the Baldwin Hardware Design Council, I can say I have seen the details and quality from design to the finished product. If you're looking for a new style and old-world craftsmanship, I can tell you there is only one Baldwin Hardware. Check out what would look great in your home at baldwinhardware.com.
It's Around the House.
We've been talking about, of course, how to keep the house cool, but right now we're going to change subjects a little bit and dive into deck inspections, making sure your deck is safe for the rest of the summer so you've got that dialed in. Well, I wanted to talk about deck inspections because we always see this time of year where it always makes the news where a deck pulls off the house or it collapses, or somebody does something absolutely crazy to it, and of course it makes the news and people get hurt or worse, and that's never a good thing. So if you've got a wood deck and it's more than, a foot off the ground, it's something you should be taking a look at. And trust me, I've put my foot through plenty of decks before that looked okay, that were a little sketchy, but I've also been on some big ones that I was so nervous on that I basically stepped off of it and said, I'm not going on that deck.
When it comes to remodeling and renovating your home, there is a lot to know, but we've got you covered. This is Around the House.
Around the House show is brought to you by Pyramid Heating and Cooling. Serving in Oregon, the Portland metro area, and Bend, Oregon, they are your one-stop shop for heating and cooling and indoor air quality. To find out more, head to pyramidheating.com, Oregon CCB 59382, and Baldwin Hardware. For over 75 years, Baldwin Hardware has been supplying luxury door and cabinetry hardware for that person that is looking for bold, handcrafted quality for their distinguished home. To find out more information, visit baldwinhardware.com. Welcome to the Round the House show. I'm Eric G. Thanks for joining me today. We have got a great second hour of the show here for you, and can't wait to dive into this one. It's so topical right now, and it's one of those things that I think we can help you out. We're going to talk about two different subjects today. One, we're going to talk about how to keep your house cooler without spending a ton of money, and some deck safety tips. Now that we're in the middle of summertime, it's a good time to go out and make sure that your deck is up to that big party you're planning on having out there. Maybe it was 4th of July last week, or maybe it's something coming up. And so we're going to be talking about those today. Now, if you want to find out more about us, or maybe you want to join our premium membership on the podcast, do that at aroundthehouseonline.com. We've got some special episodes coming up. We've got extended cuts where we've got extra long shows for you, as well as you get to hear the podcast on Thursday instead of Saturday. So you get to hear it a little bit early. So there's so much going over there, and you can find out more about our premium membership at aroundthehouseonline.com. Let's talk about how to keep your home cooler. For us here in the Pacific Northwest, we had temperatures this last week that were in that 102 to 100 range. Out here on the coast, which is way hot for us, we broke all records every day for about 5 days, and that gets pretty out of control, considering a majority of our people in our area don't have central air conditioning. So that gets to be pretty crazy, absolutely crazy. So it's one of those things that a lot of people suffer with that. When we had the heat wave here, 2 or 3 years ago, we ended up having 20 or 25 people pass away from heat exhaustion just in a couple days when we got up to 113, 114 degrees. And so it was not a good situation for people. And these are some of my tricks and tips to keep things cool for you, so that way the house is a little bit more manageable. So here's what I do. Many times during the day, you're getting up into those high temps, but at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, we get down to maybe 70, maybe it's 60, maybe it's 55, maybe it's cooling way off like it's the desert. This is the time to ventilate your home. Now, if you got to get up early, set the alarm and get up and do this, do it. Here's what I recommend doing. If you've got a single story house, I want to get cross flow ventilation in there. So I want to open up when it's cooler outside than inside the house. I want to open up my windows so you get a good cross ventilation. If you can open up all the windows and the air outside is clean, go for it. Then what I want to do is go around and turn on my kitchen vent fan, my bathroom vent fans, and see what I can do to keep that air moving outside. Start paying attention to your outside temperature, because as it starts warming up, now's the time you want to close all of it up. You want to keep all that just air inside. You don't want to have any more of that going out, because the air that you bring in, like if you're running laundry, for instance, and it's pulling air in because the dryer's pushing air out, that air is going to be much hotter. So those are the times you want to do your laundry in the morning. You want to do your dishes. And if you're going to do any baking, do it that time in the morning so you keep the heat in. And when you're outside, even though it's hot outside, it's probably going to be more comfortable barbecuing outside on those hot days than it is getting that oven or cooktop going. So that's going to be a key right there. But ventilate it early in the morning. If you got skylights that open up, that can be a really big key as well. And that'll really keep that air moving. I've noticed when I put a skylight in the highest part of my living room there, I can open that up in the morning and it's just like a chimney, and it just pulls that heat right out naturally. And if I open some lower windows, I get that cross flow ventilation, and it doesn't cost me any money to do it. And that's where you can save some money. So that's a good one there. Next one is one that we talk about a lot, and I'm tired of driving it home, but I'm just going to say it because it needed to be on the list. And that is have your HVAC system serviced annually. This will save you money. Get on a maintenance plan, take care of it, get them to clean out the coils, make sure everything's going good. If you've got an older system, they'll make sure the capacitor that starts the motor works correctly, isn't swollen up. That way, when it gets super hot, it doesn't cut out on you. Most of the time, a good technician can predict that from happening. So that way hey, you need to do this. Otherwise, this is going to break down on your next heat wave. And that'll save you a few $100 just on a service call, especially when it's an important one like that. Now, a lot of these companies, if you get on a maintenance plan, one, it'll save you money. Two, if you do have a breakdown, it'll put you in the front of the line. And they'll also sit there many times, and it's just depending on who does this, but they'll also give you a break where they're not going to charge you for after hours fees if you're on their maintenance plan. So front of the line. And so that way during the heat wave, that could save you a ton of time too. You'll get a service tech out next available versus waiting in the long line where it could be a week. Now, another little side note here as well, make sure that you've got all those heat things in your house. If you've got a heated towel floor in the bathroom, turn that stuff off. Anything that's generating heat, the clothes dryer, only use that early in the morning at the coolest part of the day so you can help ventilate things out. Only use that stuff that creates heat when you need to. So heated towel floors, shut them off. Otherwise, you're paying to heat that and cool. You're just fighting it. Another day for that comfort, as well as just making sure that you're controlling humidity in the home. Now, this is an important one because your body feels humidity at the same way that it does with temperature. This is why when you're sitting there and you're in a house and it's 70 degrees and you're like, man, it is hot in here. Even though the thermostat says 70, I bet you've got 50, 60, 70 degree humidity, which makes it feel hotter. Because if it's 70 degrees and you go, oh, it's feeling cool, for many people, now you're at 30, 40, or even 20% humidity. And your body feels that the same. So make sure that you're controlling humidity in your home during the summer. And if you want to feel cooler, make sure you've got that under control. That could be as simple as using your vent hoods in the bathroom. It could be as simple as being careful when you ventilate or having a whole house to keep that down in the summer months. If you're in an area where humidity is king outside, you walk outside in Texas and you've got that humidity, maybe having that whole house humidifier to help along with that AC, that could be a problem. Now, many of you out there that have systems that were improperly designed, like they oversized it trying to make up for that, that's where you can run into some serious problems, because when your system short cycles, it doesn't take out the humidity. It doesn't have time to do it. It doesn't move enough air to remove that. So that's one thing, is it's hard on the system. And two, you're not letting the AC do its natural thing of removing that humidity out of there. So this is one of those things that if you have in the summertime that humidity getting above 50%, if that might be an easy way to do that in the house, is to get that brought down. And then that way it's going to be much more comfortable for you. So keeping that cooler, getting that humidity out of there is going to be much better off for you. And that's going to give you that feeling of being cooler. Now, another thing is that this is my other trick and tip here. We're going to talk about this. This is something that you can jump into your local Lowe's store or jump on Amazon. And there's a cool little piece that you can go get that goes on the end of the hose that can drastically reduce the temperature in your home. And you don't even have to bring it inside. If you've got central heating or a heat pump, this can be your savior during these heat waves. Around the House, we'll be right back after these important messages. Don't go anywhere. I got some stuff to keep you cool. Do you want to be an Around the House insider? For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can get exclusive extended episodes, early access to the weekend show, and exclusive access to me, Eric G, for project questions and comments. Click on the link on your podcast player in the show notes or head to aroundthehouseonline.com and look for the Join Here button. Plus, the exclusive episodes are nearly commercial free. I don't want you to miss out on any of the giveaways or special offers. Thanks for tuning in to Around the House. Hey, it's Eric G from Around the House. Are you tired of low quality water in your home? Do you have bad tasting water? How about chemicals, minerals, and hard water scale tearing up your bathrooms, appliances, and your water heater? I have a great solution for you. It's time you stop the damage and check out King Water Filtration. This water treatment system takes care of every drop of water that comes into your home. It uses no salt, no expense filters to change, and it's made right here in the USA. Plus, it prevents hard water scale. To find out more information, head to kingwaterfiltration.com, and if you use promo code ERIC-23, it will give you $1,000 off MSRP with a discount on a filter that will resolve those water quality issues. Don't miss out on this amazing sale on a product made right here in the USA at kingwaterfiltration.com. That's kingwaterfiltration.com. And don't forget promo code ERIC-23.
What's up? This is Sticks Adenia.
And Satchel from Steel Panther. And you are listening to
Around the House with Eric G.
Yeah.
We love Eric G, and you should too.
1987, I never want to leave you. Welcome back to the Around the House show, the next generation of home improvement. Thanks for joining me. I'm Eric G. We've been talking here about how to keep your home cooler this summer without spending a ton of money. And that's where some of these tricks and tips might be able to help you keep your place cool. I've been using a lot of these this week because I tell you what, this last week it was just absolutely blazing hot in the Pacific Northwest where I live. And some of these were really good for keeping the temperature much more manageable around the house. Well, we were talking about making sure, just to give you a little recap from last segment if you're just joining us on the radio, we ventilate it early in the morning, get everything opened up, get everything ready to go. And then 2, have your HVAC system, if you have central air or a heat pump, having that serviced annually to make sure that's working great. And then, of course, this next one here is an important one. Running a mister to help your outside AC unit stay cool. So if you think about it, that outside compressor out there that is swapping out that heat, its job is to convert or remove the heat out of that coolant and send it back into the house. So when things go from liquid to gas, you get that cool process. Air only does so well for transferring heat. And what I've done is I put a hose end mister, because one, you gotta make sure you don't have hard water here. If you have hard water that's not treated, don't do this. This will probably not be great for your system. But if you have decent water that's not hard, then take that hose, go out there, put a mister next to that unit. On these extra hot heat days where you've got heat warnings and everything else, that can add another 5 to 10 degrees of temperature drop to your system. Because what it's doing is it's transferring that heat faster. It's what happens to your body when you turn the mister on. Wow, okay, I'm moving the heat faster, it feels cooler. It's helping you cool down. You're doing the same thing right there because it's trying to take that heat and push it off so it can send it back into the home. So one of those little hose end misters out there running during the heat of the afternoon can really help get your temperature down. And if you need to get 3 or 4 degrees to make it comfortable, if you want to get it from 80 to 75 in the house and your system's running at full speed, maybe that's your solution right there. And a little bit of water, a little bit of mister can go a long way. Just don't forget, set an alarm on your phone before you go to bed that says turn off mister so you're not wasting water. But if you're going to do that for a couple hours, it makes a big difference. So something to try out. Try those misters. They work really well. All right, the next one here is an important one, and it's a debatable one that people jump into that can be a headache. And this is attic ventilation. Now, I got an email on this recently, and this is an important one, and this is why I wanted to bring this up in this episode. You'll see those whole attic fans where they're a power fan on the end of the gable. And I will only say to install one of those when you have got a chance to go up and seal that space off. The biggest kind of Achilles heel of those systems are that many times that attic space is not cleaned up. What I mean by cleaned up is they haven't sealed up everything. You've got can lights that are leaking, all the holes for the electrical and plumbing, any vent fans that aren't sealed around, all those things need to be sealed any place around there. So what I recommend is if you're putting one of those in, pull the insulation back, go in, and then caulk and seal up everything between that attic space and the living space down below it. Now, if it's in the wall, use some of that fire caulking, that fire foam to go through and close up all those things. Not a bad idea anyway, but you need to stop any drafts from the conditioned space to go out there. Because what happens is you need to have more ventilation for incoming air, which is usually around your soffits. But if you don't have that balanced out, it's going to pull more, and then all of a sudden it's going to pull cool air out of your house. And people are going, why is my house hotter when I turn that on? It's because it's pulling cold air out of your house and sending it outside. Yes, you did reduce the attic temperature, but you reduced it by pulling out the cold air that's in your house. So that's counterintuitive. So you want to make sure that you go through and seal up all those areas. And really the only way to do that is to pull the insulation back and just go through it on a nice winter day when it's not hot up there, and caulk that all in, seal it up, spray foam, do what you got to do. It just needs to be sealed. Doesn't have to be pretty, just needs to be sealed up. And then you can put that insulation back and take care of it. So if you're building a house, it's an easy thing to do. You can make sure that's sealed up and put it in there. Otherwise, you're probably going to be pulling too much air inside the house and creating a vacuum there, which now you're paying to cool the attic, and that makes no sense. So be careful with those power vent fans. Those can be problematic if not installed correctly. So that's a big one. Now, the other thing is you can turn on, if you've got an air conditioner, let's say it's a window air conditioner or a portable unit, or even your HVAC system. If you want to pre-cool your house to try to get ahead on those hot days, maybe turn it down to 65 degrees, turn it down a little bit and get that temperature down. So that way in the heat of the day, when it can't catch up or can't get that close, now you're chasing it down, but you've moved the goalposts a little bit. So if your heat in the day won't keep under 80 degrees and you want it at 75, maybe if you drop down 5 degrees earlier, it'll help you keep it cooler longer. Now, it will be cold in the mornings, and that's one of those challenges. Now, another side note on this, if you're putting in a new HVAC system in, talk to your HVAC professional about going through and doing a zone system. And that's what I did in my house. So I have two zones. I have upstairs and downstairs. So I have two thermostats and two fan controls, and it actually has damper controls. So it turns off the upstairs when I want to. So what's cool with that is on a hot day, it could be 70 degrees downstairs. I don't need to have the AC on down there, but I need to have it upstairs. So it'll put everything upstairs. Now, with an older home, you are limited to what your existing ducts are that go up between the first and second floors. So in my house, it can only do so much. But the nice thing is when you do that, and with a variable speed unit, that can really save you a ton of energy and have a more balanced home. And that can save you some bucks right there. So take a look at that. If you're looking at a system, sometimes it's only a few $1,000s to add on, but get a quote to see what that costs. It might not be that crazy depending on how easy access it is to go up there, because you're gonna need some dampers and a system that can handle that, which is probably gonna be variable speed. And that will get you so you can have a much more balanced bedroom. That way, if you want that bedroom at 65 and the rest of the house at 70, if you're somebody that likes to sleep cool, that can be had that way. And something to take a look at. That could be really nice and comfortable for your home. Now, another one seems obvious. Make sure you cool the house. And when you have the house cool, make sure you close those blinds in the morning that the sun's hitting. Anything there to help reflect that. And then if you've got white color blinds, that will do better than if you've got dark ones. The dark ones will tend to bring more heat in. So if you've got nice white reflective blinds pushing that heat out, that can be good. If you've got newer windows, of course, that can help as well. But really having some great blinds in there to shut things down. And another thing is, if you're thinking about putting a new roof on, you're thinking about new colors, you're going to paint it this summer, think of lighter colors. I live in the shade here. I've got a black house, but I can get away with that because I'm mostly in the shade 95% of the day. So that black color doesn't really attract the heat like you would be worried about. Now, if I was out in the desert, that can add 10 or 15 degrees to my house and create a whole hotter building envelope as well. So that can be problematic. So think about that. Your roof color, colors that reflect heat can be really well. Now, another thing is, another trick that I use, and I want to do this before we get out to break here, is using your vent fans, your bathroom fans, and your kitchen to help move air when you need to. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about how to inspect your outdoor deck and make sure that it is safe. It'll be good for another year living on. We'll do that just as soon as Around the House returns. Don't go anywhere. Hey guys, it's Eric G from Around the House Show. We'd really appreciate your help with some awesome 5-star reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you tune into your podcast. Big thanks everyone, and a shout out to our dedicated listeners of Around the House.
Hey, this is Ron Keel, the Metal Cowboy from Keel, the Ron Keel Band and Steeler. We are rocking Around the House with Eric G.
Raise your fist, make your stand.
Welcome back to the Around the House Show, the next generation of home improvement. Thanks for joining me. We've been talking about, of course, how to keep the house cool, but right now we're going to change subjects a little bit and dive into deck inspections, making sure your deck is safe for the rest of the summer, so you've got that dialed in. But first, before we get too far here, if you're just joining us on the radio, make sure you find out more about us here at the show at AroundTheHouseOnline.com. And of course, you can find out our TV show there, which is the Around the House Northwest show. The YouTube videos are there, and you can find it all on that website. And if you have any home improvement questions, give me a call here in the studio at 833-239-4144. That's 833-239-4144. Well, I wanted to talk about deck inspections because we always see this time of year where it always makes the news, where a deck pulls off the house or it collapses or somebody does something absolutely crazy to it. And of course, it makes the news and people get hurt or worse. And that's never a good thing. So if you've got a wood deck and it's more than, a foot off the ground, it's something you should be taking a look at. And trust me, I've put my foot through plenty of decks before that looked okay, that were a little sketchy, but I've also been on some big ones that I was so nervous on that I basically stepped off of it and said, I'm not going out on that deck because I think I'm going to be a long ride down. So the first thing you're going to be looking for is on the structural framing underneath. And this is going to be that ledger board. Now, the ledger board is that piece of wood that attaches the deck framing to the side of the house. Now, first off, that thing needs to be screwed in with structural screws, bolts, or whatever. No nails. No nails in this at all. This needs to be screwed with structural screws or bolts, like lag bolts, going into the framing of the house. And I want to see that between every single joist bay as a minimum. So I want to see that going in there and making sure that that is dialed in nice and tight, about every 16 inches, because that's usually what the house is framed at. Could be 24 if it's framed at 24. I like to see it into a ledger board, so at least 16 on center down there, having that all bolted in. That needs to be perfectly done. So that way, that's attached to the house. And it seems that half to 3/4 of the time when you see those deck collapses in the news, that's because that ended up pulling off the side of the house, and then everybody took a wild ride down. And so that's one of the main contributing factors to that. So that needs to be fastened in there correctly to start with. But really, I want you to start looking for rotting or decaying wood. So get around with a little, like an awl or a flathead screwdriver, even a Phillips, and start poking around at the wood. If it seems soft or mushy, that means you've got a structural issue going on right there. So you want to make sure it is very sound. So part of that is going to be the flashing around that ledger board. So if that is bolted to the side of the house, if you're looking up, you should see metal flashing that comes out from the siding that comes down over that ledger board that those deck boards are sitting on top of. I want to see some flashing there. I want to make sure that's not, because here's what happens. If that is not flashed correctly right there, then you've got water that can go down behind the siding into the framing of the house. That ledger board can look good, but everything behind it is rotten, which means that that screw or bolt, that structural screw, those structural pieces holding that together are not holding it into something that's solid, which means that now could be the weak point. So I want to look up under those deck boards and make sure that that flashing is under the siding. It comes down between the deck boards, you know, what you're walking on, and the framing down below it. I want to make sure that is coming up through there so you can see that flashing. And that should be down there so it's kicking the water out and around it, not in behind it. That's one of those common mistakes that I see deck builders that are very inexperienced do, is they forget that flashing part. And that is its own detail to make sure you get that right. So that needs to be flashed correctly. If you're building a deck right now, then I'd want to make sure that you've got flexible flashing behind it. You've got a nice weather barrier between those two pieces of wood, which is going to be the framing of the house. And of course that sheathing. And then from there, you never want to put that up to the siding unless it's T111. But the problem when you do that is you go, oh, it's still plywood, is you still get those gaps coming down there. So you still want to cut that out and put the flashing in. If you want to put some more plywood in behind it, that's fine, but you still need to flash that off correctly and make sure that that is dialed in. Even if it's a 70s house, for instance, that has that T111, you want to make sure you do that correctly because that is a big deal to get that. So anywhere the two pieces of framing, that structural member, come together, you know, like your, let's call it, you've got, so traditional deck construction, you've got your ledger board that's attached to the house, and then you've got your joists that are coming off of that. And then that's going to go out away from the house and be setting on some kind of a beam system out there, or a beam that's attached into the end of that. So whatever that span is right there is that span of the deck. Now I want to make sure that you've got joist hangers that are coming off that ledger board onto that. And so everything is being held up by structural fasteners, whether it's Mytech or Simpson or whatever brand those are. I want to see those galvanized fasteners there. And of course, those need to be all connected together. So anytime that you have wood coming around, whether it's a beam to joists to ledger board to a rim joist or whatever, I want to see structural brackets holding all of that together. And of course, using the structural screws that go with it. We want to make sure that we don't see drywall screws, regular construction screws. These need to be the structural, like Simpson nails or Simpson screws that are designed for these brackets, because that is just as important as everything else in this whole system to hold together. So that's really important right there. Now, as you're looking at these, you want to make sure that the fasteners are in there and that there's nothing loose. For instance, your posts that go down off that beam, those need to go down on top of a concrete footing. No deck blocks, none of those little self-supporting blocks, especially if it's over, 30 inches high. That needs to be in the ground, in concrete, and then have a bracket come up, and then the post comes up from there. You want to make sure those are all connected together. And if there's any cross bracing or anything there, everything needs to be nice and tight. Sometimes just with Mother Nature, you build one of these decks, and if you've got pressure treated wood that you're using, which is a great idea, sometimes when I've had that pressure treated wood so wet and so heavy that when you fasten it all together, it's nice and tight, but it's at like 75% moisture at this point. By the time it gets through a summer or two, now it's down to 12 or 15%. So what happens is things kind of loosen up a little bit. So you might have to go around and tighten things up. That's okay. That's somewhat natural for this, especially if you're in a dry summer. So it's good to get that thing put together. So once you've got that base structure, I want you to walk around the top and make sure that if you've got wood deck boards, there's no weak points there, there's no rot, everything seems good, and that everything is finished correctly, and you don't have to worry about a failing finish that's going to lead to more rot. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is when you're going around the outside is if you've got stairs coming down. It's a great time to check that out, because stairs are one of the weak points in a deck that you'll see damage pretty quickly on. and it's one of the easiest things to get damaged. People running up and down, maybe you're moving stuff around on it and you're overloading it, whatever. Stairs can be a weak point in there because you've got a lot of wood and you've got wood that's been cut out, especially for those stairs. So make sure that they're solid. Make sure that they're not moving around. Kind of bounce around them on a little bit just to make sure everything's fastened. Those need to be properly fastened to the deck and, of course, fastened to the ground, usually into a concrete pad down below. That way you're solid. Now, the next up here is I want you to start taking a look at railings. This is another solid part where people get on that deck. They start leaning. Maybe you got 2 or 3 friends over there leaning over the deck. They're kind of letting their body weight go on it. All of a sudden, you can have 600 pounds of force on the outside of those railings. And if they're not put in correctly, maybe they were just nailed on, maybe they're not split up correctly, maybe they're not installed correctly, all of a sudden you could have people landing out in your backyard. And that could be 6, 7, 10 feet down. So this is where you can run into trouble. So you want to make sure that none of that stuff moves and that it's looking really, really good. Around the House, we'll be right back after these important messages. Don't change that dial. Welcome back to the Around the House Show, the next generation of home improvement. If you're just joining us on the radio, it's okay. You can catch the show on any podcast player. Just look for Around the House Show. And then you can find out more about us over at AroundTheHouseOnline.com. Well, if you're just joining us, we were talking in the first half of this hour about my tricks and tips to make sure that you keep that house cool without spending a bunch of money. So some of the things you can do to save money if you don't have central heat and air, or if you've got a window air conditioner, or you're just trying to keep your house cooler without having to have a huge energy bill, I have some great tricks there for you. And now we've been talking about those deck safety tips to make sure that your deck is ready for fun all summer or all year long, depending on where you're living. Well, one of the biggest things that I see as far as safety is people overloading the deck. It could be they take up the kiddie pool and put it on the deck so mom and dad can watch them, or they get up there and put something bigger like an above ground pool up there or a hot tub without engineering. Now, I've seen this, and we were just talking about it when we went out to break, about I've seen people stack a pallet of stuff up there, but you need to really pay attention to what you're putting up there. If you're putting an outdoor kitchen, maybe you've got a chimney or a fire pit. You've got, a refrigerator for the bar, whatever you're putting up there, and you throw your 10 best friends up there, all of a sudden you can be overloading that deck. And sometimes it won't tell you that you've overloaded it until things are too late. So things that I start looking for is you can take a look and see how that's built, and what wood is built and what the spans are. That'll start to tell you kind of what the max load capacity is. You can jump online, check the engineering, if they built it minimum. And what I mean by minimum is maybe you've got an 8-foot deck with 2x6s, and it's 16 on center. You got composite up there. That's kind of a minimum construction where it's going to be a little bit of a springy deck. But if you've got something that's built a lot heavier, maybe 12-inch on center because you're using composites, and you really have something sturdy, that can hold a lot more weight. So it comes down to what the spans are, and of course, what the overhang is over the end, because many times you'll have a deck that's elevated, and you'll have that beam under there, and then you're gonna have that cantilever beyond it. And so you gotta be really careful, and it's a big difference too. Maybe you've got 2 4x4 posts up there, but those 4x4s can only hold so much. If they were 6x6s, maybe they'd hold a lot more. And as a cross braced, what's the bracing of the deck to spread the load? There's a lot of things on here. If you're worried about it, you can always have an engineer come out and tell you what that's engineered for and if you're okay. So that's some of the secrets to that. So be very careful with what you do for outdoor furniture, what you do for storage, and of course, any of those fire pits, heaters, anything else up there. And then again, if you've got a charcoal grill up there, like one of my favorites, a Weber kettle, and you've got a wood deck up there, I would put down a pad on the ground that's going to be fireproof so you don't have to worry about starting a deck fire out there. Keep that barbecue clean If you've got a gas barbecue and you're not maintaining it, or even more, I've seen plenty of Traegers and other brands out there of the wood pellets where they haven't done their maintenance. Keep your grill nice and clean. You won't have as many flare-ups. That reduces the fire risk out there. We see so many house fires based on somebody forgetting to maintain the barbecue, not maintaining it, or the fire gets out of control. They get a grease fire like you would in the kitchen, and you got a heck of a mess. And that can be a major disaster in your backyard. So be very careful with that. So the other thing is I want you to go around and make sure with the railings and banisters, you're looking for wood rot. Now, any wood rot on that is something you need to jump into, whether it's on the staircase or it's around the outside. Get in there, replace that wood, take care of it. Now, what I've seen, if you're building a deck out of pressure treated wood, I'm starting to see that we end up getting into this where 15 years is an average lifespan for a wood deck out there. So I'm seeing, now I've seen them last 30 if you maintain them, you take care of them. But if you just have a deck on the back of the house at 6-8 feet off the ground, after 15 years, you can have some serious issues as far as structure if you haven't taken care of it. So make sure that if you've got a few years into it, and maybe somebody built this deck and painted it, you don't even know what's underneath it. But if it's built out of just regular dimensional lumber versus a pressure treated or a treated wood, that's going to really reduce that lifespan as well. I've seen people that have gone up there and put a cheap deck stain on 2x4s that are just your white wood dimensional stuff you buy at your home improvement store. And 3-4 years later, those things are rotting out already, depending on the climate. So it's really depending on the wood that was used and how it's been maintained to make sure you got that dialed in. And that will really help you as far as deck maintenance, making sure you got the right wood and you're treating it correctly. Here's the thing, guys. When it comes down to staining decks, I don't care what brand of stain you used. And we just did this here recently where we did some tests on deck stains on what lasted. And just in our little test, one of my best ones that I was really surprised was the Behr water-based stain. That did one of the best holdups in how we tested stuff as far as wear and washing off. The worst one for us here, I tell you what, the Thompson's water seal did not hold up. That thing was soaking water in and just was probably the weakest one in our tests that we did here. And so really make sure you got a good stain. You'll probably get a couple years out of a good stain in most places on an uncovered deck. So if you can get 2 or 3 years, you're doing great. Sometimes if you got a hot tub or something like that, or heavy traffic, all of a sudden you might be doing this every year, which is why, unfortunately, all these composite decks are super important because they'll probably last longer on that top wearing surface, and you're not going to have to sit there and do so much staining. Now, I hope some of these tips have helped you with your deck and keep you getting it maintained and keeping it up to speed. Now, none of this information will replace a really good deck inspection where you go around with a checklist or have a professional come out and do it and make sure that you're good to go. So when in doubt, have an inspector come out, have it taken care of to make sure it's code compliant, it's safe, and it's going to be safe for you and your family. This is something that's super important that gets overlooked as we're super busy in the summertime, and that can be a problem. So just make sure it's safe, it's good. That way you won't have to sweat it, and you can enjoy that until next season. Now, one of the things that you're starting to see in deck construction now that's getting interesting is when you're seeing new decks get built, if they're using wood, you're seeing joist tape go across the top of it. They make a black butyl-based tape, or now even with some people, a roll-on coating that protects that upper layer. Because what happens is when you screw down through a composite or even wood, where those screws go into the top part of that beam, they really start rotting out in there. Because any of these pressure-treated lumbers, they're treated, but the center core still doesn't get it. And so that gives a freeway right into it. These joist tapes really go in there and give you that sealed off area. And so that way, when the screw goes through that to fasten those deck boards down, whether they're composite or wood or whatever, you go down into that and all of a sudden that seals around that screw so you don't have to worry about that. So that will make things last so much longer. So if you spend $50 or $100 on tape, that can double the lifespan of that deck, especially when it comes to the framing down below. It really does a great job of doing it. So it's something to consider, especially if it's a deck that you're going to be there. Maybe you just bought the house, you're building a new house, and you really want to go that route with it. This can be a great way to extend the life of it without having to get into other materials like aluminum or steel or some of these other materials that, of course, will last longer in most situations than wood. The time that I don't think you got to be careful with is if you're getting out into coastal applications where you have salt water. Wood still might be the best way to go because that salt water can corrode the metals and get into any place that you've drilled into, and that can cause other issues. So there is no one-all, be-all perfect material for framing a deck up. But if you do wood and you do the joist tape, you'll get the most life out of it. And then if you go through and just make sure that everything is coated with a stain or a paint to help kind of take that weather, you're just going to get the most life out of it. So that's my secrets to making sure that that deck lasts the longest. Steel can be pretty cool. I tell you what, there's some great systems out there that work well. And if you're building a hot tub on top of it, or you're doing some heavy duty deck where you're going to have a lot of people up on it, or outdoor kitchen, you don't want it to move, that might be a great way to go. So take a look at it. It goes together so quickly because all you're doing is bolting stuff together. And that can make for a very seriously strong system. And you're starting to see too now trends where people, instead of using composite deck boards or some of the new rubber coated decks, you're seeing tile get put in, you're seeing large format tiles, you're seeing steel with more of a patio paver on top of it. There's a lot of different things happening to give you a different feel. I'm Eric G, and you've been listening to Around the House. We'll see you next week for another episode.
Undiscovered, anyway out beyond the mean. Life is a love song, let's be lovers. We're all over the radio. Take my hand, I know where to go. All over the radio with you.
Hey, it's Eric G with Around the House. Are you looking to grow your business? Need a spokesperson for your company? Maybe an MC for an upcoming trade show, or maybe you want to up your game and shoot some promotional videos. My team of experts would love to chat with you. Head to AroundTheHouseOnline.com and fill out the Contact Us form, and we'll set something up. Thanks for listening to Around the House.